Okay, and we are live. Welcome to a new episode of All Things Xbox Podcast. Once again, I got Logan with me. Logan, how you doing this week?
Doing pretty good, Jamie. Doing pretty good. Staying inside and avoiding the absolute summer meltdown that's going on, and just playing some games. How about you? Cooking?
Literally cooking. I mean, most of the people that listen to this show are from the US, so it's like you may maybe wonder like why are all these British people complaining about the weather, but it's awful here. The humidity where I live is like 95%. It's it's awful. No air conditioning. My desk fan is struggling to survive. Um, but all that aside, um, we've got a lot to talk about today. It's been a good week in gaming news. There will be no drama. We won't be covering certain things that's been popping off in the news this past week, if you know what I mean. Strictly gaming. Now, before we get into all the topics, we have to talk about what we've been playing because there's been some good releases this past week. Logan, what have you been playing?
Um, I just finished the bolt gun expansion, the first one. Uh, Forges of the Corrupted, I believe, is what it was, and it was a lot of fun. It's a '90s style boomer shooter set in the Warhammer universe. Like you like Quake and all those, you're down for it. Beat that. I've gone back and I started playing through the Perfect Darks again because Perfect Dark is on the horizon, and I wanted to re-immerse myself in that world. So plowing through the original one of those. Finished the Black Ops campaigns. I haven't played Black Ops 3 yet, but I did Black Ops 1, 2, and Cold War. I really, really loved the campaigns of those. Fantastic. And see, Still Wakes the Deep. I just wrapped that up. Really good, thought provoking. Went in a different direction than what I was expecting. Story wise and gameplay wise, it was pretty much what I expected it to be, which is good. I knew what I was getting into. But story wise, it was really good. I wasn't particularly a huge fan of the way it wrapped up, but I won't go into that. But just overall, I enjoyed it, and yeah. So, and about to jump into Graven, which just came to consoles today. It's I know, surprise, a Lovecraftian horror inspired, like with '90s kind of visuals with modern enhancements. You play as this father priest guy, and you have to go around and slay a bunch of unholy beasts. So sounds like a good time to me. How about you, Jamie? What you been doing?
A bunch of games. I went back to. I want to go through all the Gears games again. That trailer basically set everyone off and wanted to replay those games. Recently just finished Ultimate Edition. That game's amazing. Like Gears of War
Oh yes.
set such a standard back in 2006. So like when they did whenever we talk about Ultimate Edition, it sometimes annoys people that I call it a remake, but it technically is a remake.
It is a remake. If
Yeah,
you can call Last of Us a remake, you can call that a remake.
yeah. I mean, everything built up from like the ground up, and all the cinematics are completely redirected and shot differently. But it's an amazing game, and I think if people have never played the first Gears game, it's an absolute must. The only downside, and it's not really much of a downside, it's that we were kind of loosely promised a 4K patch when the Xbox Series X was announced, and we never got it. It's got the 60 FPS boost and all that stuff, which is great. Flawless performance, but like we never got that 4K patch. It was just kind of never mentioned again. So hopefully that does come at some point. Recently started Gears 2. In my opinion, Gears of War 2 is one of the best games ever made. I adore that game. I've probably finished that campaign probably close to 20 times. Like, it's flawless. So much fun. I've also been playing Lost Judgment. I'm on the final chapter. A great game. I mean, if people are not really familiar with the Judgment franchise, it's a detective series set in the Yakuza universe, and they're just so much fun. In the second one, you can actually skateboard around the cities. It's just a really good game. And what else have I been playing? Oh yeah, Still Wakes the Deep. Now I've said this on the channel before. When it comes to horror games, I'm a big old scaredy cat. Right? There's something about horror games. Yeah, there's something about horror games that just set me off, and like if I'm getting chased in a game, I feel it in real life. It's awful, but I enjoy the experience. Alien Isolation back in the day was 33 and a half hours of me basically crapping myself. And I've got that was Still Wakes the Deep. I'm loving the pacing of it. The whole game isn't you being chased, which I like. I mean, if people want to see someone scared, I should have live streamed me trying to play Outlast back in the day. I only got about an hour into that game and had to turn it off. It was just,
dude, I'm a hardcore horror game guy, and that one really stuck with me. So don't feel bad about that one.
yeah, Outlast. I just my heart can't handle that. But outside of that, it's a great game. I'm playing it a tiny bit each day. I think I'm nearing the end, but I'm loving it. That game's gorgeous. If you're not from the United Kingdom, you may need to play it with the subtitles on. Because extremely broad Scottish accents in that game from like Aberdeen and stuff. Logan, did you play that with subtitles on?
Yes, I did, and it was funny is because I understood what they were saying, like because I've played enough and watched enough stuff with Scottish accents, like I'm used to it. But it was funny that the subtitles don't 100% match, but they basically sum up what they're saying. Like they often refer to the generator as the Jenny, or as just an example, but then the subtitle says generator.
Yeah.
But I mean, just a little thing I noticed.
Yeah, they do actually translate the shortened terms or slang into like just regular words, because they know most of the people playing it's an international audience, but I just love the fact that the Scottish accents in a game, which you don't really hear often. The language is spot on. They swear just enough, which I love. I've got Scottish family, so that's really good. But outside of that, I've been playing Shadow of the Erdtree, which is going to be our first topic. Now, this game's been wrapped up in controversy this past week. So before the game came out, and this is where we can hate on Eurogamer a little bit, because I know a lot of people don't trust gaming media outlets, and sometimes we like to, maybe slightly take a dump on them. It's a little bit fun. Well, Shadow of the Erdtree got a 3, I believe, by Eurogamer. It was either Eurogamer or Kotaku, one of the two. And they were blaming the difficulty. Now, Elden Ring's already a difficult game. However, it's the most, I want to say, openly accessible Souls game that From Software has ever made. I mean, you have 25 million players. 25 million players in that game. And most of the people that played Elden Ring, they were newbies. They never played a From Software game before. They never played a Souls game before. And the way it was designed, anyone can jump in. Like, hell, it's the first From Software game I actually finished. And if you watch, like, about 2 years ago, I posted a compilation of every single boss fight in that game. That's something I did back then. I made sure to beat every single boss in Elden Ring. That's 165 bosses. It was painful, but I did it. So, like, I've took 2 years off. I haven't played the game ever since I finished, and I bought the DLC. I started playing it, and what do you know? I got my ass handed to me on a silver platter. Absolutely wrecked. Like, destroyed. I'm going to have clips during the podcast which people can see, but, like, am I bad at the game because I'm rusty and I haven't played for 2 years? Or is it because the expansion is even more difficult than the base game? And it's a combination of the two. It is brutally hard compared to the base game. But then again, I am somewhat mediocre compared to what I used to be. But the world design in this game is amazing. It's the highest rated game of the year, and it's an expansion. So, like, people are absolutely loving this. It's a beautiful game. The new enemy types are really cool. There's some bosses which I think have some bugs. I do think and we talked about this before we went live. I do think in the next few weeks we're going to see from Software, they're going to nerf the game. I think they're going to seriously patch it and change the difficulty of certain bosses, because there's some enemies I fought, they are clearly bugs in certain ways. But all in all, it's a fun experience. It's hard, and the best thing about Elden Ring is there's tools that help you with the game. So if you're struggling, you can summon in your mimic to you. Each of the main bosses actually have an NPC summon which you can call in, which you didn't have throughout the entire game. Also, you can call in other people to help, which there's this weird thing in the Souls-like community where you unless you play this game as brutally as possible, make it as difficult as you can for yourself, you're not playing it properly. I say screw that. If people want to play this game however they want, have at it. If someone wants to rig up a Guitar Hero controller and play it that way, and play it like brutally difficult, they can do that. But like, I will use every opportunity to make that game easier for myself. So like, I've called in people for help. I've used my mimic tier. I don't care. The only downside, I think, is that it's weird that we've waited 2 years for an expansion. 2 years. And there's no achievements at all. No achievements, no trophies, not even Steam achievements, nothing. Which is very unusual. It's unusual for a big expansion to not have any achievements. Although I wouldn't let that deter people from playing. It's a great game regardless. But yeah, Logan, I know you said you're going to wait a bit for, maybe patches and whatnot, but are you looking forward to playing it? Does the achievement thing bother you?
Yeah, I'm super stoked for this. Like, I'm going to jump in and play it absolutely. I adored Elden Ring. One of the, best games of the generation. It's masterclass game. And but yeah, like we were talking about before the show, I personally have a hunch a patch is coming within the next few weeks, and I think they are going to tweak some things. And when Elden Ring first launched, I waited a little bit to jump in, and turns out that was a really smart decision because when it the difference between Elden Ring at launch and after a patch or two was very dramatic, especially with some of the bosses like Radon. Like, you see people show clips or talk about what Radon was like pre-patch versus afterwards. Some of the enemy encounters, some of the NPC locations, item, mechanics, like there were some things that they fixed and made better. So I am personally gonna wait until at least patch one, but it is 100% an expansion I'm gonna buy and play. And the achievements isn't a deal breaker for me. I've gotten to the point where I love achievements and I kind of expect them, but I'm also old school enough to where I remember playing games without achievements for a long time. So it's not a deal breaker, but I do think that is odd, and I think they should add them.
Yeah. On topic with the Elden Ring stuff, we have the first super chat of the day by Nick W for $5. Thank you very much. He says, I used my mimic tier, but never asked for help on any of the bosses. I did everything myself. It's so good. I mean, here's the thing. Like, I beat every single boss in Elden Ring. So that's 165 bosses. That was a lot of pain. A lot of pain, a lot of heartache, and don't get me wrong, a lot of those bosses made me angry. But I think out of 165 bosses, I only called in help for maybe four bosses. So far in the expansion, I've called in help for two. Because bear in mind, I make this game harder for myself. If you watch any of the footage I've got on the channel, the compilation of boss fights or anything I've posted on Twitter, you'll notice I'm using a regular shield and a standard longsword, right? Because I do this thing in video games, and I shouldn't do this because I make my personal gameplay experience worse. So what I'm about to say, I advise gamers just don't do this. I get set in my ways and I get too comfortable using certain items. So I will push through and suffer just because I like the way things are, right? So I like the move set of the base sword you start the game with, and I stuck with it. It's now a level 25 sword. and as I'm playing it, I'm like, I've got like 100 weapons. I could easily level up a sword because I've got plenty of smithing stones, and I've got like 3 dragon smithing stones, so I can clearly fully level up whatever I want. But I'm too set in my ways. I'm too stubborn. So that's why I've called in help a few times, because like even in the base game, there's bosses that people were memeing about on Twitter saying it was too difficult that I breezed through. Like people complaining about Commander Nile. I literally walked through that dude. But when it came to the fire giant, struggle. Absolute struggle. Heartache, sweaty hands, me wanting to jump out my window face first onto the road in incoming traffic because I was so annoyed that I just could not reach the dude. I was swinging this tiny sword at this dude's toes, not making a dent. So that's why I called in for help. And the thing is, uh, I don't know if you know this, Logan, and if people are listening that maybe want to get into Elden Ring, my number one issue with Elden Ring base game was recently patched, and that is the very end boss fight, the Elden Beast. You can now call in your steed, your horse, Torrent.
Yeah, that was weird. They didn't let you use torrent
Yeah.
before.
So bear in mind, with my build and my little tiny, silver sword, I was running back and forth, not being able to hit the thing. So my one issue, where I could have soloed Elden Beast back in the day, but I got so annoyed, and I did this at like 4 in the morning, by the way. I got so annoyed, I just called in a random just to help because I was fed up with it. I couldn't do it anymore, and again, I wanted to jump out the window face first because I was so annoyed. But all that aside, Elden Ring, masterpiece. DLC, brutally hard, but again, I'm still learning the ropes. That's what you get for taking 2 years off from a video game. You can go from somewhat mediocre to just terrible, and I'm at terrible right now. But all that aside, I highly recommend people should play it. And for an expansion this big, like you're essentially getting an expansion the size of a whole video game. I kind of like that you have these video games now, like Cyberpunk 2077 and Elden Ring, that maybe a year plus later, you get this whole game sized expansion. And I hope it's something we see more of because, again, it's now June 2024, and Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree is the highest reviewed game of the year. Like, will it be up for Game of the Year contention? Maybe, maybe not because it's an expansion, but it'll probably run best running game or whatever. Who cares at the end of the day? It's a great game. Now, we have a bunch of topics, way too many topics. Let's get the bad stuff out the way because we've got maybe like 2 negative stories. Limited Run Games had their little showcase where they were announcing new stuff. And if you've been following the channel for a while, or me or Logan on Twitter, you'll know that I can't stand Limited Run Games. Their business practice makes no sense. When you have a business that thrives on sales and you're unwilling to do second prints because you will be lying to the whole, that you make limited run games, it's stupid. It's an asinine thing that they're sticking to. And like Logan, if you ran a company that printed physical games for the people that still want them, and then you decided, wait, all these people want more copies, but I run a company called Limited Run Games. Would you run a second run of like physical prints, or would you just go, no, never mind, we call it Limited Run?
Now I'd keep printing those suckers out because I mean it's a business. You're trying to make money, and there's it's not some moral quandary thing. It's a literally just printing more copies of a game, and even then, it still works with the name Limited Run because at the end of the day, these are by demand and request, and it's not a major publication or, a studio or whatever that's making a bajillion copies. It's still like, okay, we sold a batch. There's clearly more desire. Here's a second batch. And we just keep doing it. And then eventually demand subsides and you quit making them. And poof, it was a limited run. It does. It should be called one and done instead of limited run because Yeah, it's the whole idea of, you know, artificially manufacturing scarcity and jacking price, and then if you somehow miss that one run, then you go on eBay and it's like unholy amount of money to get one of these things if you really want it. It just, I don't know, it's gross. I don't like it. And
Ye-
then the fact that Xbox keeps getting punked about things, and yeah.
Yeah, we've talked about this before, and I think it's a weird business practice to not do multiple prints of limited runs because the problem is that let's say anyone listening right now, you have a limited run physical print. Well, that's literally a limited run game. So that means 2, 3 years from now, you're going to see a bunch of people selling that stuff on eBay for hundreds of dollars. Like, look at 360 games now. Do you know one of the most expensive games to buy on 360 is 50 Cent Blood in the Sand, right?
Oh yes.
Yeah, when that game was announced for backwards compatibility in 2021, that game went from averaging £10 on Amazon to 300. Now, I may be crying myself to sleep at night knowing that I didn't pick it up when I should have, but that's a story for another day. So, like, these limited print games are just gonna be sold on eBay at exorbitant prices, and it's stupid. And I know we're getting to a point now where, excuse me, most people that buy games they do it digitally, but I hate the fact that limited run games basically has all the control over physical games. And in the future, they may have exclusive rights to physical prints in general, even for big publishers. So I hope we get other companies that step in that want to do multiple prints of games because it's setting a bad precedent. But also, when it comes to the game announcements, like you said, Logan, a bunch of games are skipping Xbox. And obviously, if you point this out on Twitter, people will say Xbox guys don't buy games, and it's like no. The problem is that Xbox needs to create fan bases of these games, and they don't have the opportunity. We'll be talking about Final Fantasy in a bit, but like the PlayStation One classic, Tombow or whatever it was called, um, that isn't coming to Xbox, but it's coming to everything else. I don't see a huge Switch fan base or PlayStation fan base asking for these original PlayStation 1 games. These people that claim that nobody wants old games. But it's silly because the porting of these games, and I'm not a developer, but I can tell you this that if you port in a PlayStation 1 game and you just skip an Xbox, I'm calling that lazy development because it can't be that difficult to make that version of that game for an Xbox. Just no. But like I've said on Twitter, if people want these games to come to Xbox, just keep politely mentioning it on Twitter. Tag limited run games or the developer saying that you want the games to come because honestly, it's just ridiculous that these games aren't coming. And yeah, it's all about demand. Create some demand. But outside of that, limited run games, I don't like them much as a company. Their business practices. And like you have even EA. This really annoyed me. EA now sometimes relies on limited run games for them to distribute and make their collector's editions. So the Star Wars Jedi Survivor collector's edition was made and put out by limited run games. That thing sold out in about 5 seconds because they probably made what, two? Because it was a lightsaber, Cal Kestis' lightsaber replica. I wanted that so bad and sold out straight away. And then there's the import fees. If you live pretty much anywhere outside of the country where limited run games is at, you're paying a decent markup just for postage and packaging. It's annoying. Again, I will use any opportunity to whine about limited run games because they're crap. Honestly, crap. Um, Logan, have you got anything else to say on limited run before we move on?
Just basically like they're not the only ones out there that actually do prints of digital games that are smaller titles. Like there are, I can't remember the names off the top of my head, but I have seen several publishers that are trying to do this method as well. And, I wish them all the best in the world. And I think competition is a good thing. And obviously, it's needed here. And I really, really do not like the future idea of publishers relying on limited run games and limited run games alone to do the collector's editions or the physical period editions of their games. That just, like, pour one out for Tango and Hi Fi. I know. Sad. We'll talk about that again a little while. But the idea of Hi Fi Rush being solely for physical and stuff being tied to these guys and stuff like that, it's just. I, surely they can do something different.
Yeah, I will say this though. I do think that some companies are going to start making their because if people don't know, there's certain companies that Ubisoft, EA, THQ Nordic, basically anyone that makes discs, Xbox, PlayStation. There's certain disc manufacturers that they get in contact with that they produce them. Um, but there's also some developers where they get these things manufactured themselves. So I'm sure people listening might actually have this. If you want the Baldur's Gate 3 physical edition, it only comes in one variation, the deluxe edition. It's I've only got the European store listed here, but it's $79.99. Now you get the physical version, you get the soundtrack, you get a bunch of collectibles stuff inside. You get like stickers, a poster, patches, a map. Like I said, original soundtrack, which consists of 3 CDs. You have a game box, which is much like the early 2000s PC style boxes, and that's like $79.99, and they make it themselves. So I think in the next few years, for people that want physical games, I think they might go the Baldur's Gate route, where they make a very decent package at reasonable price, and they'll make it themselves. Because, like, I've seen the Baldur's Gate 3 Deluxe Edition for Xbox, and it's such high quality. And I used to love those early 2000s PC boxes. Um, so maybe that'll happen in the future, but I know it's a bit scary when it comes to video game purchasing, when it comes to physical stuff at the minute, because it's a weird time. I hope like so I don't know if you saw this, Logan. I wasn't going to make this a topic, but I'll bring it up. So a story kind of went live yesterday that the UK game retailer Game are going to stop selling video games and consoles in store.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the PR person from Game came out about like 8 hours later saying, "Hey, this isn't happening." And now the reason I do think it's happening is because they've done this before. About a year and a half ago, they claimed that they weren't going to sell used games anymore in like GameStop in the US. Most of the money these companies make are from used games. So when it came out that Game were going to stop selling used games, it's like you're killing off a bunch of your revenue already, which made no sense. And then it happened. So like when I hear this, I think it's going to happen. Maybe later in the year, next year, but I think it's just another part of UK retail is dying. Video game retail market's been dying since 2012, ever since Game in the UK tanked themselves as a company. I've gone over this a million times. I won't go over it again. I won't bore people, but retail in general is dead in the UK. So people would rather go to Amazon to get their physical stuff because you can buy anything off Amazon, and a lot of them are video games. So it's like there's less of a reason to go to the store, and I don't know. It's just a dark future. I've had arguments online in the past with people that, I'm okay with subscription services for video games. I'm okay with subscription services for TV and movies, but I still like the tangible, feel of a video game. You like Logan, you you're like me. You like physical games. You like digital games, but over what happened in 2020, you shifted to buying a lot of more digital games, right?
Yeah, like basically the pandemic completely changed my habits and kind of choices on that because one, Digital doesn't have the ick factor during a a pandemic. You don't have to worry about some things. Um, and then not going to stores and stuff like that. But then it became easier, convenient, and I've made it to where I predominantly buy digital now, except if there is like a crazy deal to where for some reason the digital is marked like astronomically high up, like a Nino Kuni 2, for example, like on Xbox is like $80, which is psycho behavior. Um, versus, a physical edition for some games. Or if there's like a steel book or a collector's edition I want, then I'll buy physical. Or if there's like a nostalgia factor to where it's like I've always bought physical of this series, like Halo, Gears, something like that, and I want it to, you know, I don't want my shelf to look incomplete where there's just this gap where Gears E-Day should be or something like that. Um, Otherwise, I mainly go digital now. And like you, I don't have a problem with subscription services. Obviously, I subscribe to Game Pass Ultimate.
Yeah. I just bring all this up because it's a weird time, all that limited run stuff.
Plus, they all have their things. But I want them to, this is a side note, but you remember the Haunting of Bly Manor, that horror series that was briefly on Netflix for a while,
Yeah, yeah.
and Midnight Mass, the vampire kind of series, and they were by the same creator, and how he said they wouldn't let him make physical copies or very many of his shows. Like, to me, that's a problem because if something were to happen to the subscription services and you're not allowed to buy them otherwise, then you are just royally screwed if you want to watch them if something happens to that service. Like, for example, um, not to get too much into a media tangent, but like Alias, for example, is a spy series espionage, like Jennifer Garner just boss. Like, love that series so much. And like it's not, I don't see it on streaming anymore or anything, and like the only way I was able to get it and keep it going forward was to find old DVDs of it and buy the series up, because it's not printed anymore, it's not streaming. And like the idea of like Star Wars shows or movies or games, if they were limited to only a subscription service and not being able to purchase them separately, digitally or not, that's where I would get a really dark and concerned about the future.
It's funny you just mentioned Alias because it's on Disney Plus.
Oh, it is?
Yeah. So
Oh, wow.
it might be
I
on
did not know that.
Hulu in the US. Worth checking out. But it's a weird time for everything. I think the movie 28 Days Later got a DVD print and a limited Blu-ray print, and that's it. And it's not on any streaming service at all, and you can't really buy it new anymore. So that's just one film. But yeah, it's a weird time for physical media, and I hope it sticks around. And like I've said before, I think we have one more generation of physical media, new physical media, and then that's it. I'm pretty sure whatever the Xbox next generation's called and the PlayStation 6, they'll have disc drives or optional disc drives like the PlayStation pretty much has now, but I think that's just going to be the way going forward. And we'll get the last negative story out the way because it's not really negative in the way that it's really bad. It's just it was about to happen, and that is Forza Horizon 4 is going to be delisted on the 15th of December. And I've seen a lot of people online talk about, doesn't Xbox have a game preservation group? Racing games are up there with sports games. The licenses for those cars, it's a lot of money. And unfortunately, it's not like movies where it's it's for life. You don't see like a Ford Mustang in a Fast and the Furious film, and then they pull the film because it's 2024. You know, uh, unfortunately, we're not there yet, but it's an unfortunate thing with racing games. You know, I've been doing some research, backwards compatibility lately, and previous generations of games that are available on Xbox and not available for digital purchase. And I'm not even kidding. There's probably less than five racing games you can purchase on 360 digitally. Like that's next to none, basically. Um, but yeah, it's going to be delisted on December 15th. I'm sure before then it's going to be on sale. They did it at the past few Forza games. It is the longest amount of time I believe that a Forza game has been available. When Forza Horizon 5 came out, Microsoft put out a statement saying they have no intention of delisting, this anytime soon because it was selling so well and it was doing so great in the service. So it's unfortunate, but when the game is delisted, you're still going to be able to play with people online, matchmaking and all that stuff. So the game's still going to work. Basically, there's some features that won't. Some achievements will be deactivated. It's an unfortunate thing, and also there's two expansions for that game. There's the Lego expansion, and there's the one I think it's like called Call of the Mountain or something. Uh, I think if people really want to play that, just pick it up digitally between now and then. It'll be on sale. Logan, what do you think? Because it is an unfortunate thing, but I mean, it being a racing game, we all kind of saw coming.
Hey, you there? I got disconnected for a second.
Yeah, we're gonna hear.
Okay. Yeah, it's a bummer that they're getting, delisted, but I mean, like you said, racing games and sports games and music games in particular, those are like the first three to go. And then you get to the big IPs like Marvel and stuff like that. And it's especially a bummer because it's first party and like, man, Playground must be especially happy to get Fable out the door when they do because they'll finally have a game that has staying power and will
Yeah,
be allowed to stick on the marketplace, which is kind of crazy because all their games, like from Forza Horizon 1 to now, are getting, yanked from digital shelves eventually. And I just, surely in the year 2024, we could come up with a better way to do licensing and stuff in gaming and other things going forward to where this quits being an issue. Like, there are very smart people in law, and there are very smart people in business, and there are very smart people in the entertainment industry and government and regulations. Surely we can find some way to make things last going forward to instead of just going, well, on, January 27th at 10 p.m., this just is removed from shelves. Too bad, so sad. It is what it is. You can't get it anymore. It just cause that's when some arbitrary date was instead of you know what I mean. It's like I get it and it's the way the system works, but surely they can figure something else because movies don't have this issue. Like, I want to buy Star Wars Godfather, I want to buy, The Bodyguard, some musical thing. I want whatever I want to buy, as long as it's up there aside from a few movies like we brought up, you can get them again, and it's just weird that it's a huge gaming issue.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, sports games have the same issue. My favorite sports game of all time, literally, FIFA 09. I'm pretty sure most of the reason why that isn't backwards compatible is because that has a crap ton of licensed music. Again, in my opinion, it's the best FIFA game, but it's just a shame. I do like the fact that they're giving us this much, notice, because as we've seen Ubisoft in the past, they've delisted so many games without letting people know. Capcom has let people know in advance. I really think Xbox, Nintendo, PlayStation, and Steam, they really need to have some sort of system in place where they have to let people know in advance if something's being pulled, because too many times it happens without any warning at all, and it's so annoying. And another game that got delisted recently is Beyond Good and Evil, HD edition. Now, fortunately, the remaster just came out today. It's got 4K 60, all that stuff. I think it's got HDR. It's got cutscenes that apparently link it to 2. And yes, Beyond Good and Evil 2 is still in development. Who would have thought? And that game's listed as £17. Like, I never thought I'd see a Ubisoft game listed that low. But again, that game was delisted. It's just tiring. I don't like hearing about these delisting games all the time. Mainly, I'm just annoyed at Ubisoft, because they delisted Enchanted Arms in 5 Splinter Cell games. That's annoying, by the way. I will say this though, when it comes to these licensed games, in the past I will actually buy them digitally and physically if I can. Just to make sure, because why not?
Mhm.
We're gonna have our accounts with us forever, so why not buy them digitally as well? But I think having the physical version of that as well, it's nice, But Forza, yeah, bit of a shame. But again, it's going to be available for months. Plenty of time for people to get that. You know what? Let's get into the big topics, because we still have a lot of stuff to go over. Let's go over the Game Pass stuff quickly, because some people have been asking. So some new games have been added to Game Pass, which we'll go over quickly. My Time at Sandrock, which was recently added to Game Pass. That's actually one of those chill farming town games, but it's set in like a post-apocalyptic world. One of my friends has like over 100 hours into that. She's crazy about it. But also another game that came to Game Pass today called EA Sports FC 24. I hate that name, but it is what it is. People can play that now. SteamWorld Dig is coming to Xbox Game Pass and console on June 26. SteamWorld Dig 2 is coming on June 26 as well. Robin Hood Sherwood Builders is coming to Xbox Series XS, PC, and Cloud on June 27th. And yeah, some good additions. It's kind of all over the place when it comes to the genres there, but hey, it's some variety. You know what? I want to talk about New World. So MMOs are kind of niche. Everyone knows this. Final Fantasy 16 is, I've seen popping off a lot in my feed since it came to Xbox. Elder Scrolls Online is huge. People want World of Warcraft to come to Xbox. I know I do. But there was a new MMO announced for Xbox, and it's been out on PC for a while. It's coming to Xbox later this year, called New World Eternum. And the PC community have been extremely angry about this game because they haven't been given any new updates. Basically, everything that's been announced is just for console players. But they've kind of done this really genius thing. So it's a niche game, right? MMOs are niche. But they've completely listed this game as a single-player action RPG. And everything they've shown about it, screenshots, video, Final Fantasy 14, which is what I was talking about. I get all the Final Fantasy mix. See, this is the problem when I talk about Final Fantasy. I have like 3 different topics in my mind, and I just get, marble mouth. Anyway, so New World Eternum has been advertised as a single-player RPG, but also supports up to 2,000 players co-op. But basically, they've tried to make it a more console-like experience. So all of the story content can be played in solo. There's even solo endgame content, and so there's even these like boss raids which can be played solo. There's also brand new cinematics and storytelling for console players. Obviously, PC players will get this as well. So basically, they're taking an MMO and making it single-player friendly for the console-based audience. And I love that. MMOs can be very intimidating, but if you've played MMOs in the past, you'll know that there's a crap ton of single-player content. Star Trek Online, all the story content can be played single-player and for free. Elder Scrolls Online may as well be called Skyrim too, because you can play that story single-player. Guild Wars 2, But I love the fact that they're doing this because it's making a game very, attractive for the console player base. Because again, if anyone's tried to play Neverwinter Nights on Xbox or PlayStation, it is arguably the most difficult MMO to try and get into because the controls are terrible, the visuals and performance are awful. But anyway, New World Eternum, they've done a lot of work to get this working on a console. Logan, after all of that, are you looking forward to this at all?
Yeah, this was a game that caught my eye immediately when Amazon first launched it, and it had really big numbers at launch and was doing quite well. Like, I'll be honest, when I hear the term MMO, I almost instantly tune out a little bit. It's like a trigger phrase for me for some reason. Like, I just, I'm just not into those generally. But the idea of being able to play a game that was traditionally that way, but in single player or like with a few people, to do story stuff and end game stuff and the customization, the story, everything looks really fun and good. So this is one I want to check out, like for sure. Like this one looks really really cool, up my alley. I want to pick this one up. And just side note, BioWare, come on, bring the old Republic to console and do like this for that, and you will sell like unseemly amounts of money. Like the desire for Star Wars is strong, and especially with some of the content that's been out there lately for Star Wars, I think there's a strong desire for some old Republic stuff.
Yeah, like you said, it's intimidating. It could be it can sway you off a bit when you hear MMO, because whenever anyone hears the term MMO, they kind of have this sort of like like a little shake back. They're like, "Whoa, what are you talking about, MMO?" It's like it's too much. But this looks like a pure single player action RPG, but it just happens to support 2,000 player co-op. So yeah, it looks very good. And if you've been looking for more single player action adventure games or action RPGs, this is going to be up people's alley. Again, tons of single player content, and basically everything multiplayer is optional, which I really like. And last up, when it comes to the whole multi-platform game announcements, Warhammer 40k Space Marine got a new trailer, and whenever a year is about to come around, I always predict about what my game of the year might be. And I went into this year thinking my game of the year was going to be Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2. We don't get third-person shooters that often. It can be really annoying because everything's massively open world. Everything is like a 90-hour game, and we no longer get Gears clones. Right? I missed the days back on 360 when all these companies were trying to emulate what Gears did. Unfortunately, it's been years, nobody does that. However, this game looks fantastic. It supports 6v6 PvP modes. There's also a single player or co-op PvE mode, which is basically like Horde. And there's also a full-on single player campaign, which you can play in up to 3-player co-op. The new trailer went live the other day. It looks phenomenal. And if you love Gears campaigns, and we'll be talking about Gears in a bit, this is going to be a must-play. Like, Logan, did you check out that trailer at all? Does the game interest you?
I'm actually haven't seen the latest trailer. I was already in day one for this game because like you said, I've just been really thirsty for more Gears type experiences, and the first one is great, and I really want them to bring that to console again as well if they can. But this looks awesome. It's just brutal, just over the top, ridiculous in the Warhammer universe, like thing with mechs and like aliens and chainsaw lancer gun things, and it's gonna be a great time, so I can't wait.
Yeah, it looks fantastic. It looks like it's going to be one of those games that make people go like, "Wow, this is a next gen moment." It's kind of funny that we in 2024 we still call current generation next gen, but that'll fade in time. But yeah, the game looks fantastic. It releases this September. There is going to be a beta at some point, but they just keep putting off when that is actually going to be. But that's going to be for the multiplayer stuff. Again, if you like Gears, it's Gears, but instead of a chainsaw gun, you have a chainsaw sword. What's not to love about that? And also, I think they've confirmed that it's not going to have any cosmetic microtransactions. Like, it's only going to have just the DLC afterwards, which I really like. Anyway, we'll move on. Now this game I'm about to talk about, people kept on telling me it was niche. Nobody cared about it, and that is Flight Simulator, Microsoft Flight Simulator. There's nothing like that. The visual fidelity on that level is insane. I'd say it's one of those things that you have to play when you get an Xbox Series X or S. Like, there's nothing else like it. It could be really relaxing. It's an extremely complicated game as well. But you can make the game as easy or as difficult as you want. However, it recently went over 15 million players for a niche game. And people keep telling me it's not a game. It's a game. It's just on Xbox Live. But yeah, 15 million players. Now, the only reason I don't have it installed anymore is because the game size. It's like over 120 gigabytes. And then it's even more for each like expansion when it comes to like game detail you want in certain areas. But all in all, it's good to see the Flight Simulator have this much success, because Flight Simulator 2024 does come out this year, and that is a completely different game. I've seen a lot of confusion online about this. Some people think it's just a new Flight Simulator. It's not. It's basically action based. So Flight Simulator, you basically fly around the Earth and land, fly again and land. That's all you do in the game. In this, there's missions based on different, occupations. So you can take people like sightseeing around mountains. You can go blimp. I don't know what you call it when you call flying a blimp. You can travel around. Yeah, blimping. That must be it. I'm sure someone will correct us, like from the International Blimping Society or something. But you can also like go around and like put out fires on oil rigs and tankers and stuff. Helicopter experiences. It's really cool what they're doing with this. So you're going to have Flight Simulator and 2024 that are running concurrently and being updated over time, which I really like. But I love the fact that there's just so much variety when it comes to these games now, because I've been wanting more PC-centric games to come to console, and time again, people tell me that won't work. There isn't an audience on Xbox for all these games. And we keep getting these MMOs. New World, that game that people told me would never work with a controller. Who's laughing now? And Flight Simulator has a huge fan base on Xbox. And yes, it's a niche game. Like, 1 billion people could play that. It's still a niche game, because you spend half the time flipping switches and trying to take off the ground properly. But it's a great experience, and there's nothing really like it. Like, Logan, did you play Flight Simulator much?
I have not personally, but I am astounded and incredibly impressed by the technology and the effort and the design process they put into it, and the playability of it looks fantastic. It's not something I've personally played. It is something I do want to check out at some point, and I think I might check it out once I find a good flight stick on sale, maybe, or something like that. Get really into it. But yeah, it is niche, but 15 million people is nothing to scoff at. That's a big number. And it's one of those I know the term gateway gets used for nefarious reasons for a lot of things, but it would be a good gateway game. Like, as a see, not all gaming is about this or that or this all this stuff. It's just like, see, you can just soar around and see the pyramids of Egypt or the Eiffel Tower, the Statue of Liberty, Niagara Falls, whatever iconic location you want to, or find your random house on Google Maps and fly to it. Like, it it's just a good way to introduce people to the idea of, casual, not stressful gaming and relaxation.
Yeah, I mean, when when that first came out, the first thing I did was take off from Newcastle Airport and fly to Durham to look for my house, and I found my house. It's really surreal seeing your own house in a video game. Even though it is
Mhm.
pulling, 3D map data and all that stuff. All in all, it's still really impressive stuff. I highly recommend people play it. And it's also got multiple expansions now, which are free. So there's the Top Gun expansion where you can go around in a fighter jet. There's also the Dune expansion, uh, where you can actually fly around Arrakis in an omnicopter. I haven't played that yet, but I keep hearing good things about it. You can also use the pilot, so you can also pilot the Pelican from Halo, which is really cool. It's a really cool game. I think Game Pass having all these different types of games, it's opening more people's eyes up to different genres, which I really love. I talk about this all the time, and some people get really annoyed that I'm telling people to play something different, but like I've told people this time and time again, when I was little, all I used to play were platformers and fighting games. That was basically it. I would strafe, maybe play something different now and then, but it was mainly platformers and fighting games. And then I played something called Final Fantasy, and a Metal Gear Solid, and Halo, and I fell in love with these different genres. And Game Pass lets people play these games with no barrier of entry. You don't have to pay anything extra. You can just play them right then and there. The download alone is pretty big, but outside of that, there's no barrier. And I highly recommend people just play these games, try something different, because you never know. You might end up liking a completely different genre you never thought you would. But that's Flight Simulator. Good stuff. So, I know Logan wanted to talk about this. Backwards compatibility has always been a big, focal point when it comes to Xbox, especially since 2015, because if you go back to 2013 when we got our Xbox One and our PlayStation 4s, do you know that launch day there was about 21 games available on the store that day? 21. Because we didn't have backwards compatibility. We're just basically buying everything from scratch. None of our library carried with us, and it was really annoying at the time. So when Microsoft announced it in 2015, there was this huge roar of excitement because everyone built up this massive collection of 360 games over almost a decade. Before I continue with this topic, we have another super chat by Nick W for $5. Thank you very much. He says, if it wasn't for Game Pass, I would never have played so many awesome indie games. And that's a great example right there. I tend to buy a lot of indie games that I really like physics-based puzzle games. But
I'm addicted to those too. They're so good.
Yeah, they could be really relaxing. You don't want to know how many hours I've played Cut the Rope on iPhone. But when it comes to physics-based stuff, I really love that. But there's so many top-down shooters and things like that I've played because of Game Pass that I wouldn't normally have played. And it's not I wouldn't buy these games because I don't buy games. It's you get to play games that you never would have even tried, and that's the beauty of it. A game that came to Game Pass, I think, about 2 months ago was called Harold Halibut, and that is it's an action adventure. We'll just call it an adventure game, and it's 100% built in stop motion. And there's people that told me that they adored that game, and they only play first-person shooters. So, because of Game Pass, that introduced them into a completely different genre, which they love, which opens them up in the future to more games in that genre. And I think, Nick has a good point. Indie games, especially, have had such a big benefit off Game Pass. Even the creator of Descenders, the kind of mountain biking game, has said time and time again, every time, Descenders gets brought up in, social media, it obviously gets a boost. But, Game Pass was huge for that game because it has leaderboards, it has Succession and all that stuff. So people love playing these new indie type of experiences, and Game Pass helps. You'll have these detractors online which will claim Game Pass is going to be the end of gaming and all this stuff, but it opens up so many people's eyes to new experiences which they wouldn't have played any other way. So it's great. I love the fact that people play things that they aren't used to. Again, like I said, when I was a kid, I only played fighting games and platformers. My eyes opened up. And now I don't play fighting games, and I still love platformers, but I mainly love RPGs now, That's 99% of what I play. In the early 2000s, I got into RTS games because my PC just happened to run everything perfectly. By the way, that was a good thing in the early 2000s where if you wanted a PC for school, and this is what my parents did. A bit of a tangent. My parents wanted to buy the most reliable PC for me and my brother for school, so they decided to get the most powerful PC because obviously, you need a graphics card for Microsoft Word. That's just what it was like back then. But we bought a bunch of RTS games, and that was the beauty of PC gaming back then. So many RTS games. I'm rambling a bit, but I just wanted to talk about that. But Game Pass, it's introduced so many people to different genres, which I love. But yeah, when it comes to the whole backwards compatibility thing, there's a lot of Xbox fans that'll post screenshots, GIFs, excitement over being able to play their favorite game or discover things they missed out on. And you have these people online that sort of get angry and laugh at people playing old games, laugh at people enjoying old games. You buy your games, wouldn't you want to play them for years to come? Like hell, I have games on my shelf that have been on my shelf for like 20 years, which I can still put in my modern console and play if I want. Do you know how freaking cool that is? That's great. For some reason I have like 4 copies of Knights of the Old Republic.
Hey, you can never have too many.
Yeah, I don't know. By the way, another tangent. Whenever I see a physical copy of Knights of the Old Republic, I kind of just buy it. I don't know why. Like, if I see a really good condition, version of Knights of the Old Republic, I'll just buy it, and I don't even think about it. Maybe I should see a therapist about that, but it is what it is. But like backwards compatibility is loved because people want to replay stuff. I would love to be able to replay my original PlayStation games or PlayStation 2 games or PlayStation 3 games, but I can't really. But anyway, it came out yesterday that apparently PlayStation are working on backwards compatibility. Now, people will say I'm a PlayStation hater or not. Like, no, I want PlayStation and Nintendo to have backwards compatibility. So if you bought Super Mario 3 on your 3DS, shouldn't you be able to play that on your modern Switch without streaming it through the cloud? Or, playing Metal Gear Solid 4 via the cloud? Or I don't even know if you can play that on the cloud, but like, being limited to play these games in a subscription service. By the way, everyone has a go at Microsoft for subscription services. Backwards compatibility isn't locked behind a paywall on Xbox. Well, anyway, the past 24 hours, there's been a lot of love for BC and, game preservation on PlayStation because of this rumor. This rumor that people started 4 years ago. Apparently, it's happening now. My take on the situation is that old games have always been cool. Like, I don't understand where this, like, maybe it's because Xbox had access to backwards compatibility. That's probably where it stemmed from. It was probably jealousy because of that. Because who doesn't want to play the games they love? People say all the time in my replies, well, at least I buy my games. Or you should just buy your games. And why do these people keep saying that? If they're basically saying, hey, buy your games, but never replay them, you nerd. That doesn't sit well with me. Yeah, I'm the reason people can't find KOTOR in stores. I apologize. But like, I love the fact that backwards compatibility just works. Do you know when Red Dead Redemption became backwards compatible? I think it was in 2018. That game was in the charts again in the United Kingdom when Call of Duty Black Ops became backwards compatible. I think it charted number 2 or number 1 in the UK for that month. Like, it's crazy. People don't care. Look, we have these super powerful consoles now, right, where you have 120 frames per second. You have ray tracing. You have skin on people's faces where the paws move like real people. But at the end of the day, people don't care about graphics. They care about good games. That's the reality of the situation. Do you know Call of Duty Black Ops looks bloody terrible now? But the gameplay, though, the soundtrack, just the overall experience of that game is great. The multiplayer in that game is incredible. The campaign, the zombies, everything about that game is great. Like, Logan, when you played Black Ops recently, did it ever pop into your head, oh, these graphics are bad?
No, I actually thought it held up all right compared to modern. Like it's clearly an Xbox 360 game, but like overall, it just like the experience, the gunplay, the story, the mechanics, the traversal, like all the ways they went about it. I was like, this is a blockbuster game experience, and it still holds up to this day because guess what? They went all out and they did a great job with it, and it stands the test of time, just like classic literature or, um, movies, Star Wars. Like, I always go back to the original trilogy because that's what I grew up with, or the prequel trilogy, or whatever as well, or Lord of the Rings, or like imagine if somebody was just like, ew, I don't want to read Shakespeare. Like, why? That came out in like the Renaissance period. Why would I read Shakespeare? It's like because Shakespeare is bloody brilliant, that's why. And so it's just, it drives me crazy. I'm a very patient man, and there's not a lot that bothers me, but the completely asinine attitudes about this from some pockets of some dwellers who crawl out of the cracks in the sidewalk about this stuff just drives me crazy. It is just awful, uneducated, and just moronic behavior.
Yeah. Before we continue, we have another super chat by Nick W for $2. Thank you very much. He says you can get some PS1 and PS2 games on PS4 and 5. Right, I did hear something about that not long ago. And if people do have a PlayStation 4 or 5, there's a game that people need to play. Yes, this is an Xbox podcast, but I want to recommend this game. It's called G Police. It's a kind of a first and third person game where you play as a police officer patrol on a space station in zero G in a hover car. It's hard to explain. There's nothing like it, but as you play it, you're like, oh yeah, this is definitely a PlayStation 1 game. I think you can also get it on PC, on GOG. But like, I love the fact that people have access to these old games. It is a shame you can't put in your PlayStation 1 or 2 disc in the console. Hopefully they'll do that with 3. Because at the end of the day, like, if you want to replay your old games, we didn't have them digitally back then. We had them on disc. I think, was it the PlayStation 1 had purple discs? Or was that PlayStation 2? It's all over the place. But I love the fact that people just have access to old games in general. There's so much nostalgia there. And I think the problem with a lot of modern ports of games, they can mess it up. So the version of Perfect Dark on Switch has messed up audio. It sounds awful, and I don't know why. I don't know what kind of emulation they're using, but for some reason that's messed up. Anyway, thank you for the $2, Nick. I think that backwards compatibility is just going to be beneficial to everyone. Like how is having access to more games a bad thing? And for too long, people have acted like it's a bad thing, and it just makes no sense. Like, you have these people online, they'll post a picture of their shelf, and there'll be this huge list of games, and you're telling me 2 years from now, 3 years from now, you don't want to replay them? What's the point of buying them? Because that is literally the definition of one and done, right? When I buy games, I want to replay them at some point. I replay Mass Effect Legendary Edition, shocker, every single year. Every year, Deus Ex Human Revolution is one of my favourite games of all time. I want to replay that this year as well. I'm replaying Gears at the minute. So, like, the people should be happy for this, or should always be celebrating it. In fact, PlayStation fans should have been requesting for years, big time, for these features to come over, because the technology's there. You can get PlayStation 3 games on PC using various methods. I'm sure Sony can too, like Xbox, they've done a marvelous job with backwards compatibility, but things could still be better. I still think they should keep the BC program running for longer. I think the more games that need 4K support, 60 FPS, stuff like that. But it's good that people have access to them. Anyway, we'll move on. So let's talk about the gatekeepers quickly. So uh, Final Fantasy as a topic is a weird point of contention for a lot of people. If I mention Final Fantasy online, like people get really bothered by it. And if you go to my Twitter posts, you'll notice that the replies to my Final Fantasy posts are higher than normal. So like I average between like 5 replies on Twitter. My last Final Fantasy post on Twitter had about 15 replies, and half of them were basically saying, "No, Jamie, they shouldn't put it on Xbox." Um, and it's weird, man. Final Fantasy started off as a Nintendo franchise, basically. You know, Square Enix was just putting it on Nintendo, but you have these gatekeepers online. They act like Sony own Final Fantasy for some reason. They just won't step away from it, and it's a bit of a shame because Persona and Yakuza have these like thriving fan bases on Xbox now, and Final Fantasy, Square Enix, they're wondering why their games aren't selling as much as they want to or need to, and you have just like these games missing sales expectations across the board, and then you have recently, as of last week, the creative director of Final Fantasy 16 said that yes, they're working on the PC version, and then underneath he wrote, "We want as many people to play this game as possible." Some people took this as in, "Oh well, it's coming to Xbox," right? And when I and other people pointed this out, you'd be shocked at how many people wrote, "No, they just mean Switch and PC. Only PC Switch counts." And it blows my mind. Like, there's, for some reason, people are so hung up on not wanting these games come to Xbox, and I can't figure out why. Is it some weird like tribalism thing when it comes to these franchises? Um, you know, I'm told on a daily basis that I shouldn't want Japanese games on an American console, which is kind of funny because all our consoles are made in China. So that's some weird, stupid irony there. But like Logan, this stuff, it's getting really annoying. But like for some reason, like it triggers people.
Yeah, it like the BC thing. This is another one that drives me batty because it's there. Tribalism is one thing when it's like, hey, this is a franchise that is historically associated with this platform, or owned by this platform, has always been on this platform, and only this platform, or whatever. And like Halo for Xbox, or you know, Ratchet and Clank for PlayStation, or Mario, Zelda, Link, Samus for Nintendo. Like, you take it to the bank, you know what you're getting. Like, those are with those brands and platforms for a reason. And like Final Fantasy, like you said, it originated as Nintendo and then was on PlayStation as well, and has been on Xbox as well. You know, aside from it just feels like the fan bases are taking on the personas of some executives who like the idea of keeping it off of other platforms for reasons, instead of you know like, if you really want to make Final Fantasy exclusive and keep it that way, then PlayStation should just buy Square Enix and be done with it. But Square Enix has decided they want to be fully multi-plat going forward, and these people just haven't caught up with the modern revolution of what gaming is today. It I know we talk about the glory days of the 360 all the time, but gaming has changed, and that is one area people just really need to just get with the program. It's just different now.
Yeah, it's funny because over the past few weeks we've had Square Enix come out and say that they move into it literally in their business model, their business plan going forward, lists Xbox as a major platform for their upcoming games, and even after that, you have these people online that still don't believe it. Like, people were replying to me ever since, like, oh, they don't mean Xbox, they mean Switch 2 and PC. But they literally wrote Xbox themselves. Like, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's something in the water. Like, I don't know what it is. Is it their obsession with, like, bear in mind, I had this again last night, where these people with Final Fantasy profile pictures replying to me, acting angry, because all I suggested would more people playing this game would be beneficial to the franchise. Yet these same people will port beg Halo on a Switch. like
But
again,
that's different, Jamie.
yeah, it's different, and it's crazy because, like, people act like I've done something wrong over suggesting people will be able to play this on Xbox at some point. And by the way, I do think that will come to Xbox this year. Um, it'll just be interesting as to when they'll announce it, because Gamescom, they're obviously going to have a bunch of PC centric stuff. Because again, it's Europe, so Flight Simulator and Age of Mythology and stuff like that. So, like, would it be a TGS thing? Will it be a Final Fantasy event thing? We don't know. But, like, I put this: if I post a picture on Twitter of Cloud holding an Xbox controller, it causes mayhem. For some, should I post a picture of Tifa holding a controller? That'll drive them balmy. Just something really sets them off. Like, I don't get it. And by the way, I've seen a lot of these people port beg Lost Odyssey. Bit weird. Anyway, we'll move on. But the Final Fantasy port begging, like, we joke about the whole port begging Final Fantasy thing. You know, people want access to these games, and it's fine. You know, Square Enix owns these games. Square Enix is a third-party publisher. There's a bunch of third-party, there's a bunch of Final Fantasy games on Xbox, but there's only been two major Final Fantasy releases on Xbox, and that's 13 and 15, both of which had, you know, weird reception at launch, albeit I actually really loved 13. Some people don't like when I say that. That soundtrack is incredible. But I think, you know, it'd be beneficial to everyone. Like, I always see people posting about Persona on Xbox now, which was mainly a Japanese, you know, a PlayStation thing. But I don't know. It's just weird. Anyway, we'll move on. So Avowed. Now, Avowed was one of my most anticipated, and still is one of my most anticipated games of this year. It's an Obsidian RPG. It's set in the Pillars of Eternity universe, so you're getting a world filled of rich lore, existing lore, which people love. And we got some new details recently off the Xbox podcast, the official Xbox podcast. And one of the biggest features of this game, for some reason, Obsidian didn't really keep it secret, but they just didn't talk about it. And that is the fact that you can play this game in third person. Nobody expected this. They just never posted about it. Anyway, they came out today again and reiterated that you can play the whole game if you want in third person. They went into, you know, detail about how the game development works, because some people think that, oh, this game's first person, shouldn't there just be a third person mode? Like, it's not that simple. Most of the time when you play a first person game, literally the character model you have consists of a camera and a pair of hands, right? They haven't, you know, modeled the body with animations. A lot of games are like that. Next time someone plays a first person game, look down to see if your feet are there. You'd be shocked at how many first person games where you're literally just a floating camera with arms, right? But with Avowed, they've gone out the way. They've put in a full third person, you know, animation system, and it's weird because they just didn't talk about it. Logan, did the third person news surprise you at all? Because they kept it quiet, but they just didn't really talk about it.
Honestly, I kind of, maybe it's just me, but I kind of just assumed it would be there. Like, because they are, you know, like the Outer Worlds and other games that they have made, New Vegas, And then Bethesda, like they came from the kind of similar to Bethesda tree, but also BioWare and some other influences as well. If you go way back in the weeds for their origins. But to me it was good news that it's officially confirmed, but I kind of just always assumed I could do it anyway, so it wasn't like a huge announcement to me, but I am glad that it is official and that people are happy about it. And the more options, the better for people. I was mainly from the takeaways. I was impressed with the visual upgrades it has gotten
Oh yeah.
from the developer directs where they were talking to the developers and stuff. And like some of the new races of characters and people, like the Furby people, I don't know what they're actually called, but I'm just gonna call them Furby people. And the like the branching narratives, it looks like a quintessential Obsidian game. Their master works at RPGs, so I can't wait for it. It's just more of a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of got this like low key thing going for it at the minute because it's a big year for games, and expansions and stuff. But like, I think Avowed's going to be like a really like surprise for people because a lot of people just assume it's a new IP because of its name. But Obsidian have been really quiet about specific things. So like the voice cast is apparently going to be really impressive for this game, which they haven't talked about yet. There's one voice which we know of, which was the voice of Garrus Vakarian from Mass Effect. So you've instantly got the Mass Effect fandom really interested. But the third person news is good because you'd be shocked at how many people actually tell me saying, "Hey Jamie, I'm looking forward to Avowed, but first person I just can't do." Well, here you go. Um, Although it's kind of funny because Obsidian kind of proved my point when they said that their animation system for Avowed basically means that when you play in third person, the first person arms aren't there and that there's just a character model there. And I've tried to tell people for years there's no difference between third person and first person. There's either a character in the middle of the screen or not. That's the only difference. And the thing that gives people motion sickness in video games, it's not third or first person. It's how the camera moves. We've talked about this before. A lot of games, first person games, have this thing called head bob. The Crisis games, a bunch of older Call of Duty games have this. If you turn that off, people don't get motion sick. So next time someone is unwilling to play a first person game because of motion sickness, just tell them to turn head bob off. If it has it, most games don't have it now, and they won't get motion sick. I should know. I get motion sick in general. I get on a bus or train or car for more than 5 minutes. I want to hurl my guts up. Remember that scene in Team America when he's in the street puking his guts up? That's me. That was me after playing Mirror's Edge for the first time. Thankfully now I
Oh gosh, yeah, it's bad.
yeah, that was bad. Thankfully now I don't have that problem, but people should try it. It's fun. Head bob is the worst. Like Crisis 2 had the option to disable head bob completely. So I actually got motion sick with Crisis 2 back in the day, but you can turn it off. And that was perfectly fine. Head bob is literally 99% of the reason people get motion sick. Because you have this camera just... Like, have you ever watched a film with an action sequence and it has shaky cam? Like, that can make people feel sick. It's because the camera's moving all over the place. But if you have a smooth camera movement, it's not an issue. But anyway, Avowed, third person, sounds great. There aren't going to be any romances in the game, which doesn't really surprise me. But mainly BioWare fans are bothered by this because BioWare fans are horny and they just... BioWare fans. But hey,
Where are the bears, Jamie? There's
yeah.
no bears.
By the way, you mentioned that I am absolutely dreading what the community is going to be like with those Furby people.
Oh my gosh, it's gonna be unhinged,
Like,
man.
I try to keep this podcast fairly PG, but as soon as I saw that character model, I was just thinking the amount of stuff, the demented things I'm going to see in my feed, I'm going to have nightmares. Chill out, gamers. Like, really, it's just too much. But yeah, people are going to go nuts with that. But the game looks fantastic. I love the fact that you're not locked into any specific class. So if you want to go magic, there's two different kinds of magic in the game. There's spells with a wand, and there's also hand casting, sort of like Doctor Strange. You can use guns if you want, and melee weapons, and you can switch on the fly, which I really like. Because one of my most annoying things I hate in games is when you're locked to certain classes. That's not a thing, which I love. But all in all, Avowed, it looks like it's going to be a fantastic game. It really does. You know, I love RPGs. And to reiterate on something I saw on Twitter before, someone said I was hyping up this game because it's an Xbox game and it's the new Xbox game. People can think that I'm hyping Xbox games all they want, but they'll never be able to answer this one question. Why do I never talk about State of Decay? Like if
you
I
don't like it.
Yeah, like if I hype everything up made by Microsoft, why do I never seem to talk about State of Decay? When it comes to upcoming releases, I'll say, hey, you know, this is State of Decay and it's coming, but like I never talk about State of Decay because I hate micromanagement. I think zombie games are cool, but I do not care about State of Decay because managing a community, again, I would rather jump out of my window face first in front of a moving train. Like, that's what I'm like with games, you know? The second I'm put into a menu where I have to manage people and I have to make sure these people live, I can't be trusted with a goldfish. I don't like responsibility, you know? Just keep that out of sight, you know? If they put in a mode of State of Decay 2 or 3 where I can just, you know, wreck zombies and that's that, I'm in. You know, but outside of reporting about the game, I don't really post about it. I don't post about Sea of Thieves because I played it when it came out. I'm good. I won't be going back to that. Highly doubtful. But it's the thing about me is I like variety of games. And fortunately for me, Microsoft, they put out variety. They putting out RPGs. I love RPGs. RPGs are my bread and butter. Like that's 90% of what I play. And the fact that they're going to be putting out RPGs every year now, I love that. So yes, I'm going to hype Avowed up because we live in a world where we get RPGs all the time. But do you know what all those RPGs have in common? The massive bloated open worlds. Do you know what Avowed isn't? A massive bloated open world. They came out and said this is a 30-hour RPG. Do you know how happy I was when I heard that? We never get 30-hour RPGs now. So your Mass Effect, stuff like Mass Effect, Deus Ex, Fable, like 30-hour RPGs can be so much fun. The Outer Worlds. Like that's perfect to me. Like, Logan, what do you think about the whole 30 hours thing? Because it does seem like everything is stretched out to 100 hours now, maybe just to kind of justify its price tag.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, don't get me wrong, like, I love open world games when done right and when they feel fully alive and immersive and there's lots of things to do. But there is a big old difference between a fully realized, fleshed out open world and a quote hinterland section in Dragon Age Inquisition, to where you have this huge open area you go to, but all it is shepherding goats and finding this and this fetch quest and that, and it's just to prop up the hours. It just like a 30 to 40 hour RPG or linear style story missions and like FPS campaigns and stuff like that, they just hit a sweet spot. And I think more games should scale back, honestly, and how big of scope they are and go more intensive into what they put into it in general. And I feel Avowed is going to do that.
Yeah, you had a good example there. So the hinterlands in Dragon Age Inquisition has to be the most mind-numbingly boring game design I've ever experienced. Like you mentioned, there is a section where you have to herd sheep into a pen, and it takes like 30 minutes because they keep running all over the place. Like, do I need to run around this grassy area collecting crystals, herding sheep? But if you go back to Dragon Age Origins, where it was more linear, like a Mass Effect game, Mass Effect trilogy game, or what I like to call hub world game design, there was none of that. And that's the beauty of hub world game design. Fetch quests aren't a thing. I love that. And so, like, there are people that are disappointed that Avowed isn't this 100-hour bloated experience, but think about how many 100-hour bloated experiences there are. We get them every single year. It's a breath of fresh air. It's one of the reasons why I keep praising Crisis Core. That's a 20-hour GRPG. I love that.
That's a rare.
Yeah, like we never get 20-hour GRPGs. It's like when you get a GRPG, you're basically signing up to a 100-hour experience with lots of grinding. A lot of the time, not all the time, but like every time I restart Final Fantasy X, I basically know I'm just writing like you know, a letter saying okay, goodbye, life, because that game requires a lot of grinding. But hey, that's Avowed. Avowed sounds fantastic. And the cool thing about Obsidian is that they consistently make great RPGs. So we're getting a AAA experience in a dense open world. But it's multi-region world, which I like. Not everything needs to be... And by the way, with Obsidian making this a hub world game, I've seen a lot of people not refer to it as a AAA game. So,
Of course they would.
yeah, so AAA now means bloated, 100 hours long. Not everything needs to be that, Starfield suits being what it is because of the exploration elements. You have a spaceship going from star system to star system. There's all the, sort of emergent gameplay experiences with encountering enemy starships, finding bases and all that stuff. Avowed is meant to be a Pillars of Eternity game, but in first or third person. So they making the game they want, and that's that. And personally, I can't wait for it. Anyway, we'll move on. Avowed looks promising. Gears of War. Now, Gears of War E-Day trailer kind of made a lot of people emotional. For some reason, seeing Dom and Marcus on screen again for the first time in, since 2008? 2009 or whatever, whenever Gears 2... Oh, sorry, Gears 3, 2011. It's been a very long time. People thought we would never see that era of, Gears again, let alone a prequel, and the Gears fandom has been on fire. People can't wait for Gears E-Day. And basically, it kind of confused people because recently, Gears of War 5 had an update where the start screen has a news bulletin board type thing, which hasn't been updated in 3 years. And it recently got a Gears of War E-Day update where it basically described the details of the game, which we already know about from the trailer. It's a prequel set 14 years before the first game, yada, yada, yada. But it kind of points toward the game coming out sooner than people think. Because we did get a bunch of trailers at the Xbox showcase that didn't have a release window at all. No year at the end, anything like that. But it's kind of been coming out that Gears of War E-Day may be releasing in 2025. So we could potentially be seeing Fable and Gears launch in the same year as alongside, South of Midnight. I could see that being true. The Coalition, they've been quiet for a very long time. They did have multiple projects in the works that weren't Gears, which they canned because they wanted to get back to work on Gears. I can see it happening. This is a return to roots. It's going to have horror elements, much like the first game. The Locusts are going to be deadly, which in 2 and 3 it kind of felt more comical. Not comical, but I don't know what the term is. Over the top. Yeah, over the top. But in that first game, the Locust are deadly. If you play that game solo, you can't be revived. Like, as soon as you're knocked out, you're done. Go back to checkpoint. So, like, they felt stronger in that. And if you watch the trailer, like, Marcus is, like, overthrown, like, overpowered by that Locust. And that's what we want to see. E-Day, we haven't really seen in a video game before outside of the few flashback stuff we've had. But it's arguably one of the most interesting times in the Gears franchise, which we haven't properly seen before. So this game's going to be massive. The developers have talked about how it's back to kind of linear game design, which I personally think Gears suits best. But it's going to be a big year for Xbox next year. Like, Logan, what do you think about this game possibly coming out next year?
I believe it. Coalition has been quite the busy bees behind the scenes and have been working quite diligently on Unreal Engine 5 and obviously Gears E-Day. They have future things that they want to do with the franchise as well. They have been helping basically be the IT guys for Microsoft, helping all these other studios get up to snuff with Unreal Engine 5 and helping out with development on some things. Like we jokingly mentioned State of K3 earlier, but like the reason why there's a noticeable visual upgrade, they really helped Undead Labs, get up to par and do better with engine work and fidelity. And I fully expect that it has been long enough. We will see E Day next year come out. And if a Gears collection were to exist, which I frankly still am not convinced it does exist, but if it were to exist, I wouldn't be surprised if that were to happen next year too, because it's now or never for that thing.
Yeah, it's a good point you mentioned that because I kind of want to bring that up. Like, there's been a Gears of War collection rumor going around for what 5 years, 6 years.
It's
Um,
been a while.
yeah, it's been a while, and it's just there's never been anything tangible. No art leaks, no arts leaks, no game cases, nothing. And on the other side, there's also been Gears projects in the works that have not leaked until like a month before. Gears of War Ultimate Edition leaked about a month before it was announced, just because someone broke NDA, right? And by the way, I'm guessing that person was sued into oblivion because they haven't been heard from since. But like Gears of War Ultimate Edition was leaks with their name all over these images, and that's how that happened. But nobody had any idea, no inkling that that was happening. So like, could they have possibly been working on Gears 2 and 3 to finish the collection? Like possibly, but like that's a lot of work because you're essentially remaking two extra games as well as making Gears of War E-Day. Like, I want the collection to happen because also you'd have the PC release, which I know a lot of people have been messaging me saying they want these games to come to PC because as far as I know, you can only play one. I'm pretty sure a two got a release, but I don't know if that's games for Windows Live or something, which you can't play anymore. But like, I don't believe the Gears collection anymore. I just don't. I would love that to happen. Um, Again, I've heard nothing. I haven't found any details about it, and like Logan, you have to admit, like if there is a collection, they pretty much have to announce it this year.
Yeah, like I I trust people when they say they think it's happening or they've heard things or whatever. I just personally haven't, and based on the timing of stuff and just like point blank, you would release a Gears remaster or remake collection to get people ready for the next major entry in the franchise, whether it was going to be Gear 6, but it's Gears E Day. Like, if you were really wanting to get people even more hyped for that and have a Gears collection, you would need to get that out very soon, especially if that game is coming next year, which you and I both seem to think it is happening next year. But if for some reason, unless Gears E Day is like 2026 instead, to where you have more time, I think it's now or never for Gears Collection. I really do, because I don't see them waiting until after E Day to then go back and retouch up the older ones. Like, do it to get people even more excited for it, or just leave them alone, because they're already enhanced and look great and run great on Xbox. What I would do is I would just suck it up and deal and just put the money in that you need to get those games, Gears 2, 3, Judgment onto PCs, and Halo 5 is a side tangent. Get that on PC as well. Like make these whole ecosystems whole. Like let people experience the whole franchises wherever they play. The idea of well, because of some decision some backroom accountant made or something back in 10 years ago, we don't have the complete collection. You can play all but the middle chapter or all but the second one or first one. It's nonsense.
Yeah, I hope it happens. And Gears of War 2 is one of my favorite games of all time. So maybe it's like maybe it's some sort of copium that I'm just like latching on to this being announced. Because if it was me doing this showcase, the previous showcase, like I would have had the Gears of War collection, like maybe near the beginning of the show, and then let people think that was the only announcement. So then you'd have your one more thing being E-Day. But like, I've seen people bring up like, could it be a Gamescom thing? I honestly don't think you would announce anything Gears related at a Gamescom. Like, different audience. Personally, I don't see that. Again, I would love to be proven wrong. Microsoft, please prove me wrong, pretty please, because I want my Gears too. But I don't know. Again, after recently finishing Ultimate Edition, just thinking what Gears of War 2 and 3 could look like with that treatment, I could cry. But anyway, we'll move on because Gears, I mean, we've spoken enough on that. But it looks like Gears of War ED is probably coming last year. Sorry, not last year, next year. It's been a long day and I'm melting. The room I'm in at the minute feels like a bloody sauna. Anyway, so the Xbox handheld topic never seems to go away. Phil Spencer was recently asked in an interview if it's happening, and he didn't say no, and he didn't say yes. He kind of said that Xbox should have a handheld at some point. So, like, if you run the gaming division at Microsoft and you're saying that Xbox should have a handheld, doesn't that kind of mean you're admitting that there's going to be one? like, like PC handhelds have been popping off for years. Started off with the Steam Deck. There's now the ROG Ally, which a lot of people really love. There's the LG stuff. There's the streaming tablet. There's now the Novo Go. There's a ton of them, and they're really cool devices. If you'd asked me 5 years ago, would Xbox or PlayStation, would they get into the handheld business? And I would laugh and say, no, it's just Nintendo that can do that. But these PC handhelds have proven that there's a big market for portable gaming again. So like people have been wondering, like maybe Xbox could do that, like a native Xbox handheld, and now people are wanting a PlayStation native handheld. Like Logan, do you think it's actually going to happen? Because Phil Spencer didn't deny it.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident there will be an Xbox handheld. Whether it comes out this gen or is, the console for, 2026 and beyond, I do think an Xbox handheld is in development. Like I said, I'm not sure if it's a like Series S, portable, or if they're gonna try to make the Xbox next generation experience be a handheld hybrid, like a Switch on steroids, like where you can hook it up to your TV and play 4K and all the bells and whistles you want, and then also play it on the go, or if they'll have two different SKUs and have one that's kind of like the lesser model, like fidelity wise and power wise, but you can do it portably, and then have a home model that's the more powerful, like beast machine, or maybe like even have a thing to where it's like they have a major console and then it has like an accessory that'll let you play on the go or something kind of tethered to it. I don't know, but I do think a handheld thing is happening, and you should hear that before in the next, I'd say, couple years. You'll have an official confirmation on that.
Yeah, like with all the rumors going around, and I do think it was funny that these media outlets that have sources for like certain piece of information. How none of these leaks happened at the showcase, which really makes you think. But my theory when it comes
Whole
to
hunt.
yeah, like my theory when it comes to the whole handheld thing, like if it was a Series S and a handheld, it would have been announced already. So like I don't think it's happening anymore, like at all, for this generation. My theory is next gen they're gonna do a 3 console type of SKU. So you're gonna have your Series X style, powerful console. You're gonna have your Series S like lower entry price model, and you're also gonna have the Series S type of console, but it's gonna be handheld. Because obviously the handheld version of the Series S or whatever the equivalent is, that's gonna cost money. You know, excuse me. Like the pricing of a handheld console for Microsoft, uh, that's gonna be tricky. Like, so if they get in a $300 console and squishing that into a handheld, so we're talking $500. Like, I don't know, we're talking dollars. Like, Logan, would you say a Series S in a or a Series S equivalent in a handheld form would fly for $500?
I think you could maybe get away with it at 500, but I most of those, like if you look at like the high powered like Steam Decks or Lenovo Go's or Asus ROG Allies, and you get the really beefed up versions with the memory and everything, those things are 600 plus. Like, so 500 for one is maybe doable, but with some strings attached, I would say.
Yeah. It's something they're going to have to be really careful doing there because you know what the people online could be like, very fickle, Um, I hope Microsoft does do a handheld, considering it looks like they will, because I think that'll just be interesting. The console landscape is weird because other people have talked about this. The future of gaming's weird because you have these console like handheld console PCs. Like they're flying off the shelves. People love them. People are discovering portable gaming for the first time or the first time in a long time. You have all these publishers, or say Microsoft and Sony, are now putting multi-platform games out. Like, there's a PlayStation Lego game coming out this year, right? Microsoft has some multi-platform stuff too, which people have like reacted to. But like the gaming space is like completely changing. Uh, the hardcore console, player base has basically been what 200 million since the PS2 and the original Xbox. I think these companies are trying all these different avenues, hardware and software, to mix things up a bit because, once our generation and like the younger generation, kick the bucket, so to speak, uh, like all that's left is basically free to play Fortnite players. Like it kind of just came to us recently, like there's whole generations of people now where the concept of them buying a new console to play a new game which you buy or play a game that has a story, a single player game, like it's alien to them. They just don't understand it. There's like a lot of people that their 100% like knowledge of gaming and experience with gaming is playing these free to play games. Apex, Warzone, Fortnite. So I think like Microsoft and Sony, even with hardware, are trying to entice people to just do different things because it is going to get to a point where, again, I think maybe anyone under the age of a lot of people under the age of 18, 19 or whatever, uh, the whole concept of modern AAA gaming outside of multiplayer is alien to them. They just don't get it at all. And I think Microsoft and Sony are really experimenting because like Logan, do you get me points? Like it does seem like Microsoft and Sony are just trying all they can at the minute, hardware and software, just to try and entice people to come over.
Yeah, like you said, we live in the TikTok generation now where everybody's got the attention span of a gnat, and like you gotta hook them immediately, or they're off to do something else. And like once you get them hooked, you gotta keep them supplied with content, or they burn out and then they move on to something else. But you can't be too much content, or they or they feel overwhelmed. It's just a really weird balance that they're having to deal with right now. And you know, I know this dates us and makes us sound older, but I just kind of miss the way the industry and the dynamics worked, you know, previous generations to now. Like it feels way more volatile and unstable, and there is still creativity, don't get me wrong. There is creativity, especially in the indie scene. But it just feels more like chasing fads and trying to grab onto the short term rather than taking a step back and choosing what is actually the best and most viable for the long term commitment. Like why chase, a short term trend and try to get a whole bunch of people on for a few minutes and cash in what you can and then you crash and burn, versus you've got this hardcore loyal audience who's been with you thick and thin, and they're a steady, good source of income and support. Why not just tailor to that more instead of chasing like a boom and bust stuff? And it feels like almost everyone's chasing boom and bust stuff right now.
Yeah, it is weird how back on 360 and PS3, like you had these game developers putting out these very unique experiences and let the game sell for themselves. And now they're just tracing trends and business models. Fortnite came out and basically copied copied PUBG, but they put out these things called battle passes. Everyone wanted to get in on the whole battle royale thing, so they all start copying battle passes to the point where we have battle passes in video, like premium single player video games now. And like you have all these there was a poll put out recently to game developers, and 59% of game developers think that most of the problems with gaming at the minute all boils down to decisions made by executives and stockholders. And
Yep.
it's all about money. It's all about money. Um, back in the 360, again, we'll always talk about the seventh generation. You bought an Xbox for Xbox games, you bought a PlayStation for PlayStation games, a Nintendo for Nintendo games, and like the multiplayer that generation, you were buying map packs. There was no microtransactions, and if there were microtransactions, there weren't many. We had unique games come out every single month. There seemed to be like a very healthy space because these games would come out and these big AAA games cost like $20-30 million. So now games cost way too much to the point where Xbox and PlayStation really want to maximize the amount of money they make, so they are putting games on other platforms. Like Helldivers 2 may come to Xbox at some point. That would do well there because of, the multiplayer stuff. But like the fact that there's a Lego Horizon game going to Switch because that's a full third party game now, it's a crazy time. So these game developers, they're going to mix things up when it comes to software and hardware, and the future is really unpredictable. But this isn't a doom and gloom topic, by the way. I just think it's people just need to like be a bit more like forward thinking. Like the end isn't as bleak as people may think it is. I know this is a bit of a tangent because we were talking about a handheld, but it all kind of connects together. Anyway, Logan, have you got anything else to say before we close out the show?
No, just looking forward to this week of gaming, and hopefully next week brings some good news.
Yeah, hopefully some good news over the next week. It's been a good few months, I should say a good month for video game news. Everyone in chat has been awesome once again. Cutting it a few minutes short than we normally would because I've got stuff to take care of. But again, chat's been awesome. The link to my previous video is in the description down below. Our socials in the description down below, our Twitters. I also have a video coming out this week. Should be in the next 2 days. And a video coming out next week. Bunch of Xbox stuff. And we'll be back next time for the next episode of All Things Xbox Podcast next Tuesday at the usual time. Anyway, hope everyone has a good day. We're out, everybody. Peace.